Okay, so we're back at Chapter 3, displaying and summarizing quantitative data. The last thing that we have to kind of learn about is standard deviation. And so what is standard deviation? The standard deviation, sorry about there's so much stuff up there, is kind of the basic way to understand standard deviation. It's the average distance a value is from the mean. And remember, standard deviation really talks about finding the spread. It's how far apart things are. So the farther apart they are, the larger the standard deviation. The closer together they are, the smaller the standard deviation. Okay, so we have some steps to calculating by hand. And we'll only calculate one or two by hand, but by doing it by hand, it kind of gives some people a better understanding of where standard deviation comes from. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is you need to find the average of data. Okay, we are going to do a relatively small data set. I think we're going to do 6 numbers. So let's say 5, 8, and I'm just making these up, 9, 6, 5, and then let's throw in a 7. Okay, so we're going to find the average of that data. So my average, because I added them up and divided by 6, was 6.67. Okay? And average is denoted when you put a line above something. That's the mean. Whenever you put a bar above it, that means it's talking about the mean of that data set. Okay? The next thing we're going to do is we're going to find the distance everything is from the average. How far away from average? Okay, so I'm going to actually make a table because this is going to make some things easier. So I'm showing in this one the subtraction process. We wouldn't usually do this, but it's good for notes so that you know where everything comes from. And so then I do that, and so this is negative 1.67. Okay, so go ahead and fill in that table, complete that process. Now, we found the difference, but again, it's the average distance something is from the mean. If I add up these numbers the way they are, some of the positives and negatives are going to cancel each other out and act like they're no distance, and because they're negatives. And so what we have to do is we are going to actually square the difference. Because by squaring it, it takes care of making it a positive number, and it still deals with the distance. So squaring it will allow us to actually find the average distance. So for each of these, I'm going to square. And you have to make sure that you actually square the negative, because if you don't, then it's just going to turn it into a positive. And I still don't have my calculator set up on my phone yet, so on my computer yet, so I'm using one in my hand. Okay, so finish that table. Okay, so now that we have those distances, we are going to add them. We're going to find sum of this. So you're going to add all those up. Oops, we've been using gray. I'll switch to gray. Okay, and so what we found was a sum of 13.334. Okay, so now here's something that's a little different. To find the average, you just would divide by the number of numbers. So you would think that we would divide by 6, but for standard deviation, we are actually going to divide by n minus 1. And the reason we divide by n minus 1 is because that kind of helps with some of the variability, and it allows us to apply this to other things. Okay, and so we're going to divide by n minus 1. So we're going to divide by 5 minus 1, which is 4. I'm sorry, not 5 minus 1. We're going to divide by 6 minus 1. I thought about what the answer was supposed to be. So we're going to actually divide by 5. Okay, this number we found right here, this number, that's called the variance. And that's a vocabulary word, and you're going to see it sometimes. Really what it is it's just kind of the final step, or almost the final step in the standard deviation. Okay, but this number is called the variance. The last thing we have to do is, remember here we squared everything? We got to take care of that. We got to go backwards, and the way you go backwards is now we're going to square root what we have here. So I'm going to take the square root, kind of out of space. Oh no, I'm not out of space. I can just move my mouse. So now I'm going to take the square root of, I'm not going to write it there because I want you to know. So the square root of that, and I get my standard deviation of 1.633. So that tells me that the average point from this list is 1.633 away from the mean, which was 6.67. Okay, what I want you to do now is I'd like you to find this standard deviation by hand of the 12, 15, 18, 28, 16, 17. I'm going to add up one more number. Let's do 12 again. Okay, so see if you can find the standard deviation by hand. And when you're done, you're going to type your answer into Edpuzzle, and you'll be able to check it that way, and we will talk about it in class next period.